Thanks everybody for being on here. My name is Mark Belache. I'm president of TorontoJobs.ca. Thanks for being on this segment and this session with Nauman. Got a great session coming up. Really looking forward to the information that Nauman's going to share. Nauman is founder and president of Corporate Zero, building winning, and he's going to be talking about building winning teams. So Nauman Abbasi is a proven change agent due to his leadership in several finance transformation projects and systems implementations. He's a well-rounded strategic and financial leader with extensive experience across a wide range of areas, and he possesses a Master of Business Administration degree from Queen's University in Kingston, as well as a Chartered Professional Accountant CPA designation in Toronto, Canada. Nauman founded Corporate Zero in 2020. So thanks very much, Nauman, for being on here, and I look forward to hearing you, and I'll be back when you're getting close to being done as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate the introduction. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to be able to attend this seminar on building winning teams. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Nauman Abbasi. I'm the founder of Corporate Zero, where we try to help individuals learn more about how they can be successful in the corporate world. Now, we'll go through what the agenda is for this particular session. I'll just give a small brief background on myself, though Mark did cover most of the salient points. Traits of a winning team, what makes a winning team, constraints and challenges, the different types of constraints and challenges that teams face and how those impact the ability for a team to become a winning team. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about the 6 key points about how to be able to build that winning team, with an emphasis on using sports as an analogy to this. And that's where we're going to say, you're going to be the general manager of your team. So if you're going to be the general manager of your team, these are the things that you need to keep in mind. And then finally, we'll have some final thoughts to just wrap up the session. All right, so a little bit just about myself. I have over 15 years of experience across different companies, different industries that I've worked for. In those 15 years, I've been part of teams as a team member. I've been part of teams as a builder, as a person responsible for leading that team. In addition to that, I also have 15 years of building winning teams in professional and athletic settings. These are the activities and things that I like to do on the side with friends and colleagues when it comes to building sports teams for hockey or other sports. I earned my CMA designation back in 2010 and my MBA, as Mark had mentioned before, from Queen's University in 2013. And I currently serve as a national director for a large biotechnology company in their shared services center serving all of Canada. Some personal fun facts about myself. I'm a happy husband and proud father of 2 girls and a boy. Can't say anything more than that about just how wonderful it is, of course, to have little kids, and teaching and guiding them as they grow through this interesting times. I'm also the founder of Corporate Zero, which is an initiative that started last year during the pandemic, really because it was something I've been wanting to do for years, and I thought to myself I would finally just jump into it and start trying to be able to add more value to everyone in the world in terms of what I feel I could be able to teach or offer. Some activities of interest for me are sports, reading, writing, music, travel. I think you can kind of tell by the bookshelf over there that the reading part of it is sort of validated. But I really enjoy a lot of different things, and finding time for all these different activities can be sometimes a bit challenging. All right, so let's talk about a winning team. What is a winning team? You hear all the time about, they've got a winning team or they've got a successful team. Well, when it comes to the professional context or whether it comes to an athletic context, it's going to be the same thing, and that is that they meet or exceed the expectations of their constituents. In the professional world, your constituents are going to be your customers, it's going to be your internal stakeholders, it may even be third parties outside of that. But in the athletic world, of course, it's going to be your fans, it's going to be your ownership, perhaps. It really depends on the situation, of course, in terms of who you're trying to satisfy, but irrespective of who you're trying to satisfy, a winning team meets or exceeds the expectations. They're also constantly evolving and improving their team. They're constantly evolving and improving the way they do things. And that's pertinent in order to be able to continue to be a winning team. Minimizing risks and threats to the dominance of the team is also very important, because as you've probably seen in an athletic context, no particular team manages to sustain being a winning team for a really, really long time, except for a few handful of teams that really set the standard and set the bar. They consistently perform at a high level, and that means that even though they may have some challenges here and there, they continue to deliver and meet the expectations and continue to run at that high peak. And when required, they're elevating their game. They're elevating the things that need to be done to be able to achieve that success. So, if it means putting in the extra hours when it comes down to something critical, the team steps up to be able to deliver and make sure that things get done. Finally, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's instilling and ingraining a culture of success. And what that means is that this isn't a team that's just going to be a winning team for a short period of time. This is going to be a team that's going to be successful for a long period of time by the fact that they've created this culture that incubates and encourages people to want to be the best that they can be. It becomes a place that people want to join and be part of and learn from. It's a desired place in that context. The key thing about all of this is that irrespective of the team's level of success, whatever success this team is going to have is going to start right from the top of the team. It's going to start with you. It's going to start with the leadership and the protocol that you set and you establish with your team. If you want a team to be effective, if you want a team to be the best performing team it can be, you need to lead by example yourself. And if you're not leading by example, or you're not stepping up with the right traits, the right habits, the right tendencies, then your team is going to suffer from it. So you have to embody the very principles that you're expecting from everyone on your team. If you want a strong team and you want them to be compassionate and be able to adjust and adapt to certain situations, then you must be flexible, then you must be compassionate, and you must be able to adapt and adjust. You're setting the standards, so that's how a culture of success gets born. Furthermore, when we bring it back a little bit more to the business world, to the corporate world, these are some of the questions you need to ask yourself in terms of whether or not your team is succeeding. From a sales context, you're talking about growing market share. Is your team doing that? Is your sales team actually accomplishing that? Are they obtaining more customers? Are they retaining existing customers? These are the marks of a sales team that is winning, if they're able to do these things on a continued and sustained practice. An operations team, for them, is going to be more about deploying products or producing products, and does it meet the expectations of the customers? Is it meeting the expectations in terms of delivery, timely delivery, I should say? And of course, is it getting produced that meets a certain level of quality? For finance, human resources, and information technology, some of these questions that I've listed here are some of the different things that also apply. I'm not going to go through each one of these. I'm sure you can be able to read some of these that are here. But the key point in this is that you need to be able to objectively assess whether or not your team is accomplishing the tasks and objectives that you're expecting from them. And if you're leading a sales team, you need to be looking at whether or not your existing customers are staying with your business. You have to be looking at whether or not you're obtaining more customers. You need to be looking at growing market share, and so on and so forth when it comes to each of these different areas. These are, of course, sales, operations, finance, HR, and IT related, but there's so many different other areas when it comes to a business. And this is very applicable to most any area or function. But it really has to start with being able to objectively assess that team and say, yes, this team is able to do that. No, this team is not able to do that. And areas in which your team is not able to succeed or is not able to do as well, hey, that's okay. Why do I say that? Because it means that's an opportunity for development and growth. You've got an opportunity right there and then to start building and developing a culture of success to be able to grow market share or obtain more customers or retain existing customers. So see the opportunity for what it is and take that opportunity. All right, so some of the constraints and challenges that come with this, and this is going to apply to most any organization, most any team that's there. You're going to obviously have the budget and cost constraints. You can't obviously hire a whole bunch of people at ridiculous salaries because you've got that constraint, of course, to be able to make sure that you're staying within a budget. You also have constraints when it comes to the number of people that you have, headcount or full-time equivalent. You can't necessarily hire 100 people when your budget may only allow for 10 or 20 people. So obviously you have to stay within that constraint. And of course, the natural constraint of the fact that if your team is a finance team, you've got specific roles and responsibilities specific to finance. If you've got a human resources team, it's going to be specific and particular to what a human resources team would do. This is where, of course, these are natural constraints that have to be observed and have to be understood. How do you keep your costs within your budget? How do you keep the number of employees within the expectations? How do you ensure that only specific functions and tasks are being performed? This third point is really important, because it's amazing how many teams have tasks that are actually being performed within that group that may not actually be necessary for that team or for that group or for stakeholders. So you really need to be able to assess and assure that your team is focused on the right, and of course, are they being completed effectively? So we're going to use and tie this back to the sports world. We're going to make you the general manager of your team. And as you can see from Uncle Sam, which is the best picture I could find on the internet to be able to have someone pointing at you, but you're the general manager of the team. So if you're the general manager of your team, you're going to be the one who has got to look at these different areas of leadership and look at these different things that you need to consider when building out a team. And we're going to use sports analogies because most everyone can relate to sports. Either they're a fan of sports, they play sports, but also because of the fact that the parallels between sports and managing a winning team in the corporate world, in the business world, are actually quite significant. There's a lot of similarities between the two. The context, of course, is slightly different when it comes to sports versus business, but in a sense, you're competing for the same thing for each side. In sports, you're competing for a championship. In business, you're competing for customer success or revenue growth. These are all things that build up to that championship, of course. All right. So the first point is you need to possess a keen eye for talent. And what that means is that if you have a team and you're building this team, you have to understand what it is that you need in terms of that team to be successful. You need to be able to assess and determine what makes a good employee or a successful employee for a particular task. Coming back to a sports analogy, you can't hire a grinder to play a first line role and be a big time scorer if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, because the Toronto Maple Leafs are not going to have success if they're going to expect 40, 50 goals from a third line or fourth line winger as opposed to one of the top talented, skilled players. And the reason for that is because not everyone is cut out for that. They don't grow on trees. And the same thing applies in the business world. Not everyone is cut out to be that go-to person. And some may not actually even want to be that go-to person. Some may want to be more of a supporting player or more of a specialist. They may see themselves as someone who likes to work with others to support and help the group as a whole, but not necessarily be the one that's going to carry the load because it may not be towards their skill set or towards their abilities. It varies from person to person. Every person's got their own potential, and you have to be able to assess that and understand who can be able to learn, develop, and grow into that role that you need fulfilled. It's really important to understand that because a lot of companies, a lot of teams make the mistake of hiring individuals who do not necessarily fit the profile of what they need to be successful for in that particular role. And this comes back to the fact that sometimes people assume that everyone wants to move up and grow when that's not necessarily the case. Through my experience, I found that there are some folks who want that challenge, who want to be the one who can step up and be the one to lead and be a go-to person for the team. And that there are some people who would rather prefer not to do that and may not even have the right skills to be able to do that. It's important to take the time to talk with those players and understand what it is that guides them. What is it that actually makes them tick? Some folks, like I said, don't want to be in the limelight. They may not want that shining star on them because they feel that it may not be towards what their aptitude is or what their experiences are or what they want to do. So you have to understand what it is that they're seeking. Have regular dialogue with your folks, and we have pro tips for each one of these, so you can kind of read the pro tips and see how you can be able to apply this mindset, this thinking, to a real life application. The next point is establishing a role for your players. And as I mentioned before, not everyone wants to be a star player. Not everyone wants to be that scoring player for your team, right? I mean, not everyone can be the Kawhi Leonard of the Toronto Raptors and is responsible for putting up 23, 24 points a game and a certain amount of leadership and rebounds. Some folks just want to be the guy who can help set a guy like Kawhi Leonard up for success. So you have to understand what the roles are for your players and the roles are for your team. If you're building a team that's call it a finance team, right? You're going to have an accounting group, you're going to have an accounts payable group, an accounts receivable group. Develop out what it is that you need for that team in terms of the different roles. Maybe one person is going to be more specialized towards a certain business or a certain group of customers. Maybe another area would be responsible for a certain area of the P&L or the balance sheet that they're focused on. But you have to carve out what those roles are going to be so that you can be able to effectively hire for those roles properly in terms of where everyone's going to go. As I mentioned before, having a keen eye for talent is also really important to make sure that you've got the right people to grow and develop with. And if you're going to procure subpar talent, you're going to struggle. Don't settle for just hiring any person that you can be able to hire. Settle for the best people that you can be able to hire. And if those people are smarter than you, all the better, because smarter people are going to help the team grow. And I'm not the smartest person on my team. I learned from some really smart people on my team as to how to be able to do certain things. And from learning from those individuals, I benefit from that. I grow from that as well. Every championship team puts out strong players on the field. They put the best possible players that they can be able to put out there and be able to succeed with. So having strong talent is vital. One pro tip that I've mentioned here that's, there's a couple of points here in terms of this, but what's really important to understand is that when looking for talent, look for people who have that drive, who have that hunger, who really want to be able to prove and develop and grow. Hungry players are going to work twice as hard as those who may not be as hungry. So there's a lot that has to be said about desire, motivation, and push that comes from those individuals. Salary caps are an important part of the sports world. You've heard so much about the salary cap in hockey, which is a hard salary cap. And what that means is when you have a hard salary cap, you cannot exceed that salary cap. You're pretty much set at being able to spend to a certain limit. So I believe in the NHL right now, it's 79 or 80 million or something like that. That's the salary cap. So every team in the NHL can spend up to that limit with certain restrictions. Now, in the business world, you've got pretty much the same thing when it comes to a salary cap, because you've got a defined budget that tells you that, hey, you got to spend only $1 million on your particular department, no more, no less. And you need to make sure that you've got all the different talents on your team fulfilled and taken care of, and they're happy and they're in that role that you need them to be in. So you have to be very careful about how you manage that salary cap. In the sports world, you've probably seen with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm using Toronto examples because we're in Toronto and most people can relate to Toronto, but it applies to pretty much any team. But a team like Toronto, you can see that they have some star players that they've signed to lucrative contracts because these are really special, desirable players. And additional supporting cast on that team, they've been very careful to make sure that they slot in at certain price points that are really well defined and really clear as to, this is as much as we can spend for that role. It's no different when it comes to the business world, when it comes to the corporate world. When you're developing out your team, you want to make sure you've got everyone slotted into that salary cap, and you're very clear as to where you can be able to spend and where you may have a little bit of more of a tighter restriction. And you have to admit the fact that some players may not fit within your structure. And if some players don't fit within your structure, you have to be prepared to be able to address that, handle that, and move on from that. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. Challenging your team is an important part of this as well. You have to recognize and understand that your team needs challenges. People are not going to want to do the same thing every day, all day. Well, I shouldn't say some people don't want to do that. Most people don't want to do that. There are some people who just like the monotony, who like that consistency in terms of what they're doing. But for many people, they want challenges. They want to learn new things. They want to try something different. So you have to be able to give your folks opportunities to succeed. A goal for some people might be different than what it might be for another group of people. So you have to be mindful of what the different goals or objectives are. And you have to give them reasonable chances of succeeding at that goal as well, or that challenge, because no one wants to take on a challenge which is impossible or not even something that's realistic. So you have to be mindful of the challenges that you're giving to your team. But giving those challenges helps people grow. And as they grow and develop, you're going to see greater things out of those people. You're going to see greater things for your team. You're going to see more success in having that winning team. As mentioned before, some people are not going to slot in to your structure when it comes to a salary cap. You're going to lose some people. You have to be cognizant of the fact that not everyone is going to slot in within certain price points. And you're going to lose some folks to free agency, or you may lose them to other things. In the sports world, there'll be injuries. In the real world, it could be a whole slew of things. It could be health reasons. It could be various different problems. You never know. But regardless, you need to be prepared for that, because unexpected events can and will occur. I mean, that's just life. So as players are going to move on to other opportunities, you need to be ready for that. Do you have the right type of people who can step up into that role, who can be able to take on additional tasks or challenges? How in tune are you with why people may want to be part of a different team or a different organization altogether? Do you understand why it is that people are leaving? Because if people are leaving because of simply over a couple $1,000s, okay, then you understand that it's strictly a cost issue. But many times, folks are not leaving a team or an organization because of a couple of $1,000s. There's more to it than that. So coaching, dialogue, communication, and of course, adequate compensation are all factors that help ensure that you're able to keep good talent as you need to within that structure. Ultimately, though, be prepared for the fact that you will lose people on your team. And sometimes that can be a good thing, because it gives you an opportunity to be able to bring in talent that might be better suited for what you need. So view the situation as you need to view it, but be prepared for it. Don't let it come up unexpected for you. One thing that you can be able to do for this, by the way, as the pro tip mentions, is developing contingency plans for each person on your team. So if you're gonna have a team of, say, 5 people, and you've got 2 senior people and 1 intermediate and 2 juniors, be mindful of what happens. For example, if you're to lose one of those senior people, is your intermediate person ready to step up? Do you need to go outside the organization? If you go outside the organization, does it impact what happens with the intermediate person's growth? What about the junior people? Are they going to be ready to step up into an intermediate role, and so on and so forth? These are things that you need to think about and develop those contingency plans for each player, or at least for each key player where you're able to. Developing a prospect pipeline. The best organizations have a constant stream of blue chip talent. The Toronto Maple Leafs did a great job of that when it came to developing out some of their star players today, because they brought in that blue chip talent. The Toronto Raptors have done a great job of doing that, and that's what led to their championship. They had a great supporting cast that they cultivated and developed. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, these are players that didn't have the same level of maybe pedigree as some other folks that would have gone selected in drafts when those players were up for drafts. But the development and the pipeline work that the Raptors did helped develop those players into great supporting players and now stars. So that tells you about the talent level that has to be behind the scenes as well when it comes to your structure and when it comes to your team. The Toronto Blue Jays are trying to do the same thing, right? They've got a whole bunch of young players coming up, led by Vlad Guerrero and Bo Bichette, who are blue chip prospects, and how they're going to be able to come up and step up into key roles. The key point out of this is that people are going to move on. So if you've got a good pipeline of young talent coming up that can be able to grow and develop with, that can be cultivated, that have that hunger and desire to learn, you're going to have a better chance of success, sustained success. And that's really the key. No team's going to succeed over the long term if they're concentrating on just getting short-term moves, getting short-term players. You can't keep going to the free agency to fill and plug a hole, because if you're going to do that, you're going to also alienate some of the folks on your team who want to grow and develop. This is why it's important to create a culture of development and training. So these are the key points that we've just talked about when it comes to each of the different ways in which you can be the general manager of your team. We've talked about the importance of a pipeline. We've talked about the importance of adhering to a salary cap. We've talked about the importance of planning ahead and developing contingency plans. Really, really important. But these are some of the 4 or 5 things that maybe you need to be mindful of when it comes to the overall picture of building a winning team. You set the tone. As I mentioned right from the get-go, you're the leader on that team, so you need to make sure that you're setting the standard and that people can be able to understand, hey, this is what it takes, then this is what I have to do, because that's what the boss is doing, or that's what our leader is doing. This is where you need to make sure you're embodying the very things that you want out of your team's culture. And if you embody those traits and you develop that type of culture, you're going to have success. Team culture gets established by the leaders, but it gets reinforced by having strong veterans, having folks on your team who are going to be able to take your cues and say, hey, this is what we got to do, and this is how we're going to do it. This is where the rest of the team comes into line. The key players on the team have to be the key leaders on the team. Change is inevitable. You have to accept that. I mean, this is the reality. I mean, COVID-19 is a perfect way to be able to kind of say how change is inevitable. We don't expect some things to come up, and we have to be ready for that. But the reality is, when it comes to your teams, people are going to make moves. They're going to make moves for themselves, whether they want to be, they want to relocate for better opportunities elsewhere, or they want to relocate to a different opportunity due to geography. Who knows? There's so many different factors that go into it. But you have to understand that change is coming. So how are you prepared for that? How are you going to address and make sure that your team is ready for that change when it comes? Maintaining the status quo isn't possible, and nor should it be something you should aspire for, because if you're maintaining the status quo, that means you're not developing and growing. Perfect example from the sports world, the Los Angeles Lakers, NBA champions last season. What do? They go out and they get some star talent in the offseason to further develop and grow their team so that they have a better chance of being able to win the championship again this year. They didn't need to do that, or did they? I think they did, because the reality is everyone else is catching up, and they need to be able to make sure that the status quo isn't simply just going to be what they're going to aspire for. There are other ways to incentivize your teams beyond salaries and benefits. We didn't really talk about that too much, but that is something I wanted to put out there, because it's not always about salaries and benefits. It's about the culture you create, about the environment you create, about the support that you give your folks. And if folks feel like they are part of something great, part of a winning team, they will make concessions to be able to be part of that. How many sports players have you heard of? How many athletes have you heard of who have taken a low amount of a salary or a contract simply to be part of something that's got success tied to it? A championship team, or a reasonable shot at a championship. You hear about that all the time, players doing that. Joe Thornton, Toronto Maple Leafs, $1 million contract. He could have got a little bit more if he wanted to, but he didn't have to, because he thought to himself, I want a shot at a championship with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's see if that actually happens. Finally, plan ahead, prepare for different scenarios. And we've said that throughout the session. You need to think about what happens, or what could happen, if you have folks on the team who decide to go a different route. These are the traits, the examples, and the things that you can be able to do to build a winning team. And like I said, it starts with you in terms of how you set the culture, how you set the tone. But the sports world is full of so many different examples and parallels. Great way to be able to take a look and say, hey, what are they doing there that's leading to their success, and how can I apply that on my team? I don't have anything further at this point. I don't know if there's any questions. I don't see any in the session chat, but I'll leave that open for a second or two. At this point right now, that is the seminar or session. Any questions?
Oh, Nauman, that was great. I love the references to the sports analogies and everything else. Can you hear me, Nauman? Nauman?
Yep, I can hear you now. Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. That was great. I love the references to the sporting side. I'm a big fan of sports, so I can relate to everything that you said about Joe Thornton and the Leafs and everything else. Being a longtime Leafs fan, suffering for all these years, it's been interesting to see over the years how the team has changed. But I guess I did want to ask you one question, and that is that in the sports world, you can trade somebody, and that's your way of getting rid of somebody. Now, there might be some fantastic players who are, who you can't trade. Like, they're great players, but they're just not part of your team. So how do you get around that? Because, if you have some other employees that you see, they might be a little bit more, well, that great player just left, or they got, terminated, or maybe they quit because they were bored, whatever the reason is. How do you manage that side of it after they leave?
It's a great question, and I think it's really a twofold question. I guess the first part of the question is, can you trade talent? And the answer is actually yes, you can. And that's when you partner with a great HR firm, a great recruiting firm that can be able to help you bring in good talent. It will sometimes cost you. I mean, in the business world, in the corporate world, you don't have the luxury of necessarily making a one-for-one trade and swap out a player. You will probably have to look at different situations, whether it's severance or whether maybe it might be an opportunity within another team, looking at different things like that. So trading can be done in that sense, though it's of course not an exact one-for-one comparison when you're talking sports and the business world. But the second part of it is that if you have a player on your team, they may be a good player, they might be a great player, but they don't necessarily fit the construct of your team. They may not fit the roles that you need within the team. You need to have dialogue with that individual. That's where you have to talk with that individual and say, hey, this is what we need from you. We think you can be able to do some of these things. Some of these areas you're not doing as well on. What do we do to bridge the gap? That communication is vital. When you talk with that employee, you talk with that person, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, they're going to say, hey, okay, I didn't realize that's what you're looking for, and maybe I need to adapt and adjust myself, and they can become potentially the type of player that you need in that role. And the second thing that could happen is they could say, hey, okay, I realize I'm not really fitting in with the program here. Maybe this may not be the right fit for me. And they may start looking at that as well. And not that you want to drive anyone ever out, but the dialogue helps initiate things. I think many organizations, many teams get into the habit of simply letting individuals languish, and no one really knows what's going on. Is that person staying or going? What's happening? Are they even performing the way you need them to perform? And that person's thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, pressing buttons here, and that's it. Communication is vital. So that's really, I think, where the start comes from.
Excellent. Great advice. Well, Nauman Abbasi, founder and president of Corporate Zero, has been talking about building winning teams. A lot of great takeaways. If you are wanting to reach out, Nauman, LinkedIn, best way to reach you?
LinkedIn is a great way. You can reach me on LinkedIn at just type in my name, I suppose. It should show up. And you can also visit corporatezero.com. We have a contact form as well, which you can also use to reach out to me.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much. Great takeaways. Thanks for being on. Coming up, if you're just joining, my name is Mark Belash. I'm president of TorontoJobs.ca. We have a couple of great sessions that are starting right now. Justin Feldman, co-founder, Accounting Clients Accelerator, talking about how to get high-paying clients fast. And Tony Salgado, president of AMS Wealth Inc., will be talking about why insurance and succession planning matter. So make sure to hop on over there. You can navigate to the sessions area on your left-hand side, and from there you can get into the room. So thanks very much, Nauman, and thanks to all of you for being on here. Signing off, and let's head on over to the other sessions or go into the networking area. Don't forget to take the polls, and don't forget to allocate some time to check out the expo area, which will give you some information about products and services that might help you in your firm. So thanks very much. We'll see you soon. Thanks.